When I was 15, something truly fascinating happened to me. I got sick, not a common cold, but the humbling, achy, fever type sick. Of course, we all get sick, and this wasn't my first time, but it was the first time that I got sick as a teen after puberty. For context, I get sick probably once every 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years. Growing up, my mother was also very aware of this and would tell us how we should be very thankful and to thank God for our health. It was something I always gave thanks for in my prayers at night and something I always thought about and felt grateful for when I first woke up. Anyways, what completely shocked my 15-year-old analytical brain was how paradoxical being sick now made me feel. Physically, I felt crummy, achy, hot, and exhausted. But mentally, it was as if the clouds had cleared and I remembered who I was and what I used to naturally feel like all day, all the time. You're probably like, what in the hell does that even mean? But let me explain very quickly. Every time I get sick, and like I just said, I mean really sick, not the stuffy nose or cold, but the feverish, achy sick, it feels like I arrive at an altered state of consciousness that is peaceful, content, and familiar. And if you haven't noticed by now or can't tell by my voice, the reason I'm making this video is because I'm still recovering, but I just had like the worst flu I've ever had in my life. And before this flu that I had, it was probably 3, 4 years ago that the last time I not only had the flu, but even had a cold. But anyways, I noticed this specifically with my sense of smell. It is such a unique, distinct smell. It's so weird, but it's accompanied by a state of mind that feels nostalgic, but in the best possible way. Nostalgia, usually by definition, has a sense of sadness, but this feeling is so positive. I feel present, lighter, and incredibly blissful and peaceful. To put this into perspective, I do not believe I have ever felt true bliss in the sense of the word, except for these specific experiences. I almost feel high, like honestly, in the way that opioids, or at least I've never done opioids, but when I hear people describe the opioid high, I feel like this is must be what it's like, except this experience feels so healthy and you're in the most clear-minded state possible. It's like a genuine happiness and contentment that comes from within instead of the usual satisfaction that we receive from outside things like money, rewards, or success. I feel okay with everything and I'm stable. I'm not like euphoric. I'm not overly happy or overly relaxed or overly sad. I'm just balanced, present, and happy. It is a state of mind that feels so intensely familiar, like this state of mind is what we used to always feel every day as children before puberty and hormones and the stress of life hit and makes you think you can't believe that you forgot about this familiar emotion. This point actually brings me to the reason I said earlier about me noticing this mental difference when I was 15 rather than noticing it, the first time I got sick as a child. I think as children, our brains are at this level naturally that causes life to be experienced through a blissful, lighter, happier lens. This is why children also can sometimes handle tough or uncertain times during childhood better than adults because their brains can't really understand the severity, but also are just incapable of it because of its developmental state. They are just naturally happier. It's their neural structure. This is also something I feel like I can make a whole nother video on, and again, something that's actually hard for me specifically to find studies on, but this, in my opinion, explains why everyone, no matter who you are, has such nostalgia for your childhood and why the world that exists in our memories when we look back just feels objectively better. It is the same world all along. The only difference is our brains have changed. I think when we get sick, our minds revert back to a similar state of mind, which also explains the sense of familiarity and the surprising realization that we used to always feel this good and light and worry free. Now, like I said, I am the most analytical person I know. I have probably 100 questions every day about everything, no matter how small, and I'm always hungry to learn. So this experience always brings me to Google and Reddit and message boards trying to find a scientific study or explanation. I have only really ever been able to find a single paper on this regarding mice and the melanocortin 4 receptor, but even this paper doesn't really seem to explain what I'm describing. This paper says that mice only preferred sickness and had elevated perceptions of it after a certain receptor was removed, and states that naturally dopamine is lowered when sick, which is what makes sense and is usually observed across the board with all animals and people alike. The agreed upon consensus is that being sick is associated with negativity across the board, physically and emotionally. Now, what I have noticed on Reddit and Quora though is that some people do share my experience and also describe it as a familiar bliss feeling, but something they cannot find studies or scientific evidence to confirm. Because of this, I have a couple ideas that I think probably help create this paradoxically positive experience. Firstly, and probably the most obvious, is that being sick is associated with the happy memory of a day off from school and relaxing. Similar to the way that fall time always feels like new beginnings no matter what age, because of the association with the new school year growing up, being sick brings back memories of the ecstasy of your parents saying you can stay home and being able to sleep in and rest all day. Secondly, being sick causes your body to redirect and redistribute energy and resources away from the brain and more evenly throughout the body to fight off infection. This forces your brain, and if you have possibly worried or negative thoughts, to be put on hold because your brain physically doesn't have the energy to focus on them. Like I said earlier, as a child, we are physically incapable of putting things into real perspective like a mature adult, so we don't worry or feel the dread of reality as much. Being sick possibly causes a similar mindset. Lastly, and most interestingly, even though, again, I couldn't really find evidence on this, our body is probably flooded with endorphins and dopamine in response to the pain and aches from being sick as our body tries to repair itself. It's a cycle that is natural all throughout the body. First, we feel negatively and respond to pain or discomfort, but it's usually followed by endorphins and dopamine. I like to compare this to the feeling that some also describe as a high after their muscles are torn and begin to repair themselves after working out. The only difference, of course, is that being sick probably, if this can be proven, causes a much larger endorphin response because it's not just your muscles that are in pain, but your entire body as your immune system fights all throughout it and not just in the muscles. Now, one thing I have also heard as a possible explanation, but something that I don't buy, is that possibly the experiencer is a naturally depressed or anxious person and doesn't realize it, and when they are sick, they are finally allowed to rest, and the rest helps them mentally. Now, I'm not saying this is impossible for everyone, but for me personally, I am a naturally positive, optimistic, and happy person. So this doesn't make sense for me. Before I get into this mindset, if you would have told me I could be so much happier than I already am, I wouldn't really believe it because I'm already pretty content. One other possible explanation is an altered state of mind from flu medications, perhaps like the ingredient DXM, which helps with cough suppressing, but when taken in large doses can elicit hallucinations and euphoria. The only thing is, recommended doses of medications that contain DXM have such minuscule amounts of it, and DXM has a half-life of 2 to 4 hours. This means that the effects from the recommended dose usually last for 5 to 6 hours, and the effects, at least the euphoric effects, are minuscule. What I have noticed though is that this state of mind usually arrives after the first day. So the first day of being sick is never pleasant, it's a shock, you feel like shit. But then after that, you transition into the positive mindset, and that mindset usually lingers for the next week to 2 weeks. Last week I had the flu, and I don't have the flu anymore, but you can tell I'm still recovering from it. And it took 7 to 14 days, and honestly, even right now, I'm still in that mindset. But 7 to 14 days after my last dose of medication for this mindset to begin to taper off. And it seemed to correlate with exactly how sick I felt instead of the ingestion of any medication or outside thing. Anyways, this experience is just something I wanted to talk about because, again, the lack of studies or people seeming to be able to relate. It really feels like any mental issue dissipates and an emotion takes over that cannot really be compared to anything else before it. Every time I get sick, this state of mind comes around again, and it always stumps me with its familiarity and uniqueness. No emotion can really ever compare or come close to touching it. Every other time I compare how I feel now to, other good times in my life where I also felt good, like maybe a good childhood memory, a memory of getting what you really wanted for Christmas, or maybe the ecstasy you feel as a child when you find out your popular crush likes you back, they all seem surface level and unbelievably inferior to this emotion and mindset. Honestly, this sounds exaggerated, but it really reminds me of the mindset people who have near-death experiences or who are near to death experience. A feeling of familiar, blissful peace that cannot compare to anything else. A mindset that feels happy, but a true unwavering happiness that doesn't need the currency of an outside award to be experienced. It is a state of mind unaffected by outside or internal forces. Like the mind has shifted gears and nothing can phase it. I don't know. Like I said, I just wanted to know if any of you can relate. And honestly, I really do hope that one day we have some studies that can explain this and maybe we can learn how to recreate it without having to be sick. Or who knows, maybe this is what runner's high feels like because it's just an abundance of endorphins as my body tries to heal itself. But yeah, can any of you relate? Do you think I sound insane? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I hope y'all have a very good day.